Evening folks, Adam here, and I've had a question that I want to address on tonight's Ask Adam Anything, and that is on the topic of how to handle passive aggressive comments. Alright, so this is in response to one of our Facebook group members, Heinrich, and he has said, I have a follow-up question to the very helpful negative comments template. How best to respond to passive-aggressive comments like, how can you prove this, how do you know? So this is a great question, and it's kind of worth us discussing, because a lot of the time, if it's a straight out negative comment or trolling comment or whatever else, it's easy enough to identify them and either ignore them or block them if it's really nasty or spammy or off topic. But when it's somebody that's in your network, or maybe your second degree network, but there's mutual contacts, and they're getting a little bit snarky or getting a little bit passive aggressive, it can be tricky. Not least of all because often when we just type stuff into a comment, it's very difficult to understand the context, and it's very easy to misconstrue what people are saying. So even if you probably know it's passive aggressive, I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt if there's kind of comments that might feel a little bit prickly, or they're challenging you, or they're suggesting that you've got other motivations for doing this type of whatever it is that you've done. So I guess my tips here is firstly, just to be how to handle passive aggressive comments. Try to be as polite as possible. So even if you know they're kind of having a dig at you, even if you know that they are a bit angry, or they're taking it out on you, or they're just trying to aggravate you a little bit, or maybe they're dismissive of what you're up to. I always, especially on Facebook, especially on LinkedIn, especially where your comment is going to live on that page for a while, unless of course you delete it, which I don't recommend. So always try and be super polite. Even if you feel angry, if you do feel angry, let it sit for a while. The last thing you want to do is be drawn into a sort of a shouting match or a bickering match in public on Facebook or LinkedIn. So always be as polite as you can. Answer if they do ask a question like, how can you know that? Or what was the example? How do you know? Let's just pull it up here. How can you prove this? Or how do you know this? Well, look, I would actually answer the question as sincerely and as politely as possible. So if someone's challenging something that you've said, and how can you prove this? We can either say, look, here is some of the research that I base this on, and link off to that or cite that research. And you can say, here's how I've chosen to interpret this. This is how I reach my opinion, and explain it as if it was a very well-intentioned question, and it's sincere. Answer it as best as you can. If it's something like, how do you know this? You may say, look, I don't know this as fact. I believe it to be true. I don't have proof, but here's why I believe this statement or this video or whatever is true. And give your reasons and say, look, not everybody's necessarily going to agree with me. Here's my reasons for my stance. I'm open to other people's opinions and everything else too. So keep the dialogue open in that initial response. Be polite, acknowledge that other people may have a different point of view, and politely and calmly give your answer, because it very often can lead to some really good discussions when everybody stays civil. But it is social media. Our behavior on social media can sometimes sort of veer away from being civil, and that's when things can turn a bit nasty. And you've probably been on Twitter, you've probably been in YouTube comments, you've probably been on Facebook, when people can suddenly just turn nasty. If that happens and it does go down that path, you don't, or my suggestion is, I wouldn't recommend matching their behaviour and turning nasty or turning defensive or turning aggressively. I would still, if they continue to disagree or make snarky comments or how can you prove this, without sort of contributing meaningfully to the conversation going forward, I would offer to take it offline. So an example of that would be, okay, it's the second response, they're still snarky, whatever the word you want to use is. Say, hey Heinrich, I appreciate this discussion. I've kind of made my point. I don't have too much more to add, but tell you what, I'm going to direct message you, and I look forward to sort of having a private conversation to hear you out. That way you're taking it off the public forum into a private forum, and you might also at the end of that statement say, this is the last I'm going to comment on this, so I'll DM you or I'll send you a note on Messenger if you want to talk about it further. That way you take it offline, it signals to your group, to your followers, to your friends, to your network that you're not just hiding, but you don't want to have this kind of deteriorating conversation in the public eye, in your Facebook group or on LinkedIn. And that way you can take it offline, and if they do continue to come back and back like some people do, then at least to more rational, calm people, they will see that and they're going, okay, he has responded kindly, calmly and politely. He's offered to take it offline. That's all you can expect. I would not do, if they continue to be passive aggressive and narky, that is, I wouldn't do any more than 2 responses publicly and just leave it at that and let them know that's the last you'll hear from me on this. I'm happy to have a private conversation, but I've explained it in full in my initial response. So in a nutshell, that is it. And of course it can get prickly, it can get a bit tense, especially when they're people in your network, especially if they're people that you might do business with or might work for or might hire or all of those sorts of things. It can make it difficult. Silence isn't always the best option. It's an option, but it makes it look like you're hiding. But certainly don't be angry. Don't be defensive. So no to angry, no to defensive, and no to being nasty. So big no's for all of them, and a big yes for being polite, offer to take the conversation offline, and 3, thank them for their contribution. I know the phrase kill them with kindness is a little bit naff, but I do think that being really kind and sincere and thanking them for taking the time to contribute, to share their thoughts, to challenge me on this, I do appreciate it, and what I'm wanting to do is have a private conversation with you from here. So anyway, folks, that is what I reckon my solution would be and has been when faced with these types of things. I'd love to hear any thoughts or comments. Let me know, and especially if there's any real situations you're facing, folks, feel free to ask it in the Facebook group. I'll do a Facebook Live, and I'll always find time to answer your questions and do a video for them. So keep them coming, and I'll see you again very soon. Cheerio.